98.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
Congress has been seizing those opportunities left and right. Nothing happens unless severe consequences are looming. That has led to the least productive Congress in 40 years. The 112th Congress that just left Washington enacted 220 laws. That number is less than half what the 110th Congress achieved just 5 years ago. And compare that to the late 1980s when Congress enacted more than 600 laws each four-year term. I want to bring in Will Kane, a conservative CNN contributor. Chrystia Freeland is the editor of Thomson Reuters Digital. Richard Quest is the host of Quest Means Business on CNN International. Will, before we start, I want to show our viewers this timeline that you sent us. You call these do-or-die moments in Washington. I hope I'm representing you well. In late 2010, Democrats and Republicans started a fight over extending the Bush tax cuts for wealthy Americans. Ultimately, President Obama signed an extension of the tax cuts for all taxpayers. Now, 4 months later, the president and congressional leaders cut a budget deal that cut $38 billion in federal spending for the year. That agreement, if you recall, came less than 2 hours before the government would have shut down. In August of the same year, the White House and Congress were in the same position they're in now, bumping up against that debt ceiling. That provision of the deal created the fiscal mess, which we have still not solved. And Congress closed out 2011 with the payroll tax cut and unemployment benefits 2 days before Christmas. Yet another massive fight on a relatively modest stopgap measure that both sides had largely agreed on. And of course, I don't need to remind you about the fiscal cliff fight that we just got done with. Congress could not come to an agreement even as massive spending cuts and tax hikes were scheduled to take effect. But Congress still hasn't had enough. Now we have 3 more fights looming. If the debt ceiling isn't raised by mid-February or early March, the government won't be able to pay its bills, which would put the United States credit rating at risk and damage the fragile economic recovery. And while Congress did resolve the tax portions of the fiscal cliff, they put off a decision on the sequester. Those are those spending cuts, and that fight will play out in March. And finally, because the president and Congress have not been able to agree on a budget since April of 2009, the U.S. government is operating on these continuing budget resolutions. The current one expires at the end of March. Now, Will, you say this dysfunction is a symptom of an underlying problem that we are not talking about. Please explain to me what that underlying problem is.
That schedule you just laid out has been extremely advantageous to you, Ali, in this program, because it's giving you something every, 4 or 5 months to talk about and lambast. Appropriately so. You look at the Congress, and particularly sometimes you have focused in on Republicans using these moments as leverage to get essentially the federal budget in order, to fight over what our priorities are in spending and taxes. And you know what? Sometimes I think you're 100% right. I don't like seeing Republicans use the debt ceiling in particular as a moment of leverage, but you are using and focusing on symptoms of this crisis, not the cause. And it's the fact that for 44 months, this Congress has not passed a budget. 44 months, almost 4 years, we have no idea what the priorities of this government are.
And as Christine pointed out, the budget are the priorities of a government. I want to discuss how serious this might be, Chrystia. Let me show you this poll from Gallup. It's about the way politics work in Washington. More than 3/4 of Americans say that it is causing serious harm to the United States, but 52%, see this other poll, 52% are optimistic that the way politics works will improve in the next 10 years. And I think they also think we're going to domesticate unicorns. In November, Americans voted to keep Washington divided. Democrats control the House of Representatives, control the Senate. Republicans control the House of Representatives. That stayed the same. Why would anybody think this is getting better?
Well, there is something known as the optimism bias, which is well known in social science. We all tend to be a little more optimistic than our real experience tells us. And you know what? I love the optimism bias. That's what makes you, believe you can write a book, even if you can't write the deadline. Believe you can get up and face the day. So thank God for the optimism bias, and I think this is just a view, not social science backed. But my personal belief as a non-American who loves America is Americans are particularly prone to the optimism bias, and that is great. Having said that, when it comes to these political battles, I think actually a do-nothing Congress is not always a bad thing. Not tackling things, not tackling things, not legislating is not always bad.
When I tweeted that information out, somebody said to me, the job of Congress is not just to pass as many bills as they can. So there may be something to the fact that we're not passing as many bills.
Right, exactly. And right now, I think these artificial crises, because they are man-made, these are not things that the world economy is forcing upon the United States, in contrast, say, with Europe. I think the best thing for America, for anyone who runs a business, for anyone who wants a job, would be if the debt ceiling and the sequester, people just forgot about for 12 months.
This is an interesting point. Richard, before you go there, I want to ask you something, because I think we may be lying. Christian may have a point that we may be lying to people about, because Christine says it, and you say it, and I say it on our shows all the time, that the businesses hate uncertainty. You know what? All we've had is uncertainty. Seriously, all we've had for 5 years is uncertainty. Guess what? The stock market is at a 5-year high.
Actually, you can call this certainty. That's happening with such frequency that you can be certain it's going to happen again.
Is this just a new normal and it doesn't matter? I mean, can we just forget about this and move on?
They like certainty, and markets will wobble if there's no certainty, but business gets on with doing business. They learned how to trade in the most unfavorable scenarios. Look at the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. Business knows what has to be done. It has to cut back when it has to spend more, all those sort of things. When it has to shift production, it may be uncomfortable, it may be unpleasant, but when it shifts production to low-cost environments. So business, corporations and companies, they know what has to be done. They just wish this lot.
No, and the main point, Ali, you talked about the fragile recovery, and it is fragile, but it is a recovery. And I think that now that Washington has gotten past the big tax debate, the best thing would be do no harm. It's a fragile recovery. Let it get stronger. This is not the time for the grand budget bargain that some people are talking about.
Both of these people have pointed out things that I would actually agree with, and Richard's pointed out essentially the fact that business is resilient. The business can operate in a worst-case environment. We just wish it wouldn't have to. We just wish it could operate in an optimal environment. And I want to just underline something Chris just said, that just because you pass more laws than a Congress that may follow you does not make you a better Congress. And some of this fight, some of this crises is natural. It's going to happen when you must make difficult decisions about your spending and taxing. It's natural consequence of a big choice.
It's also a product of the system you've got, and I'm with you on it. I mean, you know, love this country, I've lived here, but it's the system you've got.
Oh, but an efficient parliamentary system would be so much better to get things done.
Well, at least it does get things done, unless it happens to be.
Well, I think Richard and I came to this agreement last week that there are certain things for which the American political system works better, and certain things where parliamentary system works better. This is one of those instances.
The key is, what do you want to get done?
No, and the other issue is, Will, that the American system is well designed for a country which has an effective political consensus. The divided government, which is structurally there, works when you have parties that are able to come to an agreement, do deals. The reality right now is, I think the nation is quite fundamentally divided, and certainly the elected representatives are very divided. It hasn't always been like this.
What we can't have, the rest of the world. I'm going to stand out a bit now from the rest.
No, I am. I'm the only American standing at this table.
All right, so you're the odd one out. What the rest of the world cannot have is more of what you were just showing, month after month after month.
But you know, we're just getting you back, because that's what you guys did in Europe. You must feel really good about this when you come up here and say, oh my God, you guys are as disorganized as we are. Will is not apparently going to shave that beard until the debt ceiling is debt ceiling is raised.
Debt ceiling beard.
All right, Will, good to see you. Christian, thanks so much. Richard, stick around for a minute. You're not going to have Tim Geithner to kick around anymore.
As a kid growing up in Queens, I had dreams of making a difference in the world.
As Jack Lew, he gets to make a difference now. He's going to be the next Treasury Secretary of the United States. But will he actually make a difference? Richard and I go head-to-head for some Q&A after this.